I couldn't believe my eyes as I pulled up to my house after a long day at work. There they were, bright orange traffic cones blocking my driveway with a crudely made cardboard sign reading community property. Do not park. I sat in my car for a moment, wondering if this was some kind of joke. I'd only been living in Oakwood Estates for 3 months, but this was a new level of absurdity even for this neighborhood. With a sigh, I got out of my car and began moving the cones aside. That's when I heard it. The shrill voice that had become the soundtrack to my home ownership nightmare. "Excuse me. What do you think you're doing?" Karen Winters stormed across the street from her impeccably landscaped yard, her highlighted bob bouncing with each aggressive step. "Those cones are there for a reason. That driveway is not yours to use however you please." I placed the cones on my lawn and tried to keep my voice steady. "Karen, this is my driveway. I own this house and the driveway comes with it." Her face flushed an alarming shade of red as she jabbed a finger toward me. "No, you're mistaken. That's a community access easement, and I've already called the HOA and the tow truck. You can't just monopolize shared property." Little did I know this confrontation would be just the beginning of a nightmare that would end with flashing police lights and an arrest that would leave the entire neighborhood in shock. I had moved into my home in Oakwood Estates just 3 months earlier, thrilled to finally have a place with a spacious driveway where I could park both my car and occasional visitors without hassle. The neighborhood seemed perfect, well-maintained homes, quiet streets, and a sense of community I was eager to join. That dream lasted approximately 48 hours before I met Karen Winters, the president of our homeowners association. She appeared on my doorstep the day after I moved in, clipboard in hand and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Welcome to Oakwood Estates," she said with practiced enthusiasm. "I'm Karen Winters, HA president. I just wanted to drop by with some friendly reminders about our community standards." She proceeded to hand me a 12-page document of rules and regulations, highlighting sections about proper garbage complement, approved mailbox designs, and the exact shade of beige I was allowed to paint my house if I ever decided to repaint. I nodded politely, thanked her, and thought that would be the end of our interaction. I was wrong. Just a week later, Karen knocked on my door again, this time with concern etched across her face. "I noticed you've been parking in your driveway," she said, as if reporting a serious crime. "Yes," I replied, confused by her statement. "That's what driveways are for." She tilted her head and gave me a condescending smile. "Actually, in Oakwood Estates, that particular area is considered a common access easement. You can't block it with a parked car. It inconveniences the entire neighborhood." I looked past her to my driveway, which led directly to my garage and didn't connect to any other property. "I don't understand. This is clearly my private driveway." Karen's smile tightened. "The HOA bylaws are very clear about this. I suggest you familiarize yourself with them." And with that, she turned and walked away, leaving me utterly baffled. The situation escalated rapidly from there. First came the written warnings slipped into my mailbox, each one citing obscure sections of the HOA regulations about community access points and shared thoroughfares. Then I started finding notes tucked under my windshield wipers whenever I parked in my own driveway. "Violation," they read in Karen's unmistakable handwriting. "Continued infractions will result in fines and possible towing." I tried reasoning with her at the monthly HOA meeting, but she dismissed my concerns with a wave of her hand. "The rules apply to everyone," she announced to the room, though I noticed several other residents shifting uncomfortably in their seats. No one spoke up to contradict her. Later that week, I ran into my next-door neighbor, Mike, who sheepishly admitted that Karen had been terrorizing the neighborhood for years. "Most of us just try to stay out of her way," he explained. "Last year, she had Jim's classic car towed because the color wasn't on the approved list. It took him weeks to get it back." I was determined not to be intimidated, but my resolve was tested when I returned home from a dinner with friends to find my driveway empty. My car had been towed without any notice. The next morning, I confronted Karen as she was pruning her roses. "You had my car towed from my own property," I said, struggling to keep my voice level. She didn't even look up from her gardening. "That's what happens when you hog what belongs to everyone," she replied with smug satisfaction. "Maybe now you'll learn to respect our community guidelines." It cost me $300 to retrieve my car from the impound lot, and my patience was officially exhausted. That weekend, I drove to the county records office and requested copies of my property documents. The clerk was surprisingly helpful, especially after I explained my situation. "We get a lot of HOA disputes in here," she said with sympathy as she handed me the paperwork. The documents were crystal clear. The driveway was 100% part of my private property. There was no easement, no community access point, nothing that even remotely suggested it was meant for public use. Armed with this evidence, I attended the next HOA board meeting. Copies of the property survey and deed in hand. I presented my case calmly, showing the documentation to each board member. Some nodded in understanding, but when Karen saw the papers, her expression darkened. "These are obviously fake," she declared, standing up from her seat at the head of the table. "Anyone can doctor documents these days. That driveway has always been community property, and it will remain so under my watch." The other board members looked uncomfortable but remained silent, as Karen dismissed my evidence. As I left the meeting, one of them, a retired gentleman named Frank, whispered, "She's got most of them scared to cross her, but what she's doing isn't right." The next day, I noticed something new. A security camera mounted on Karen's house pointed directly at my driveway. She had escalated to surveillance. When I ordered a package, she screamed at the delivery driver for pulling into community property. When I had friends over, she photographed their cars and threatened to have them towed. It was clear that Karen wasn't just enforcing rules, she was waging a personal war. I'd reached my breaking point. I filed a formal complaint with both the HOA management company and the local police department documenting the harassment, false towing, and invasion of privacy. The officer who took my report seemed familiar with Karen. "We've had other calls from your neighborhood," was all he would say. 3 days later, Mike knocked on my door. "You need to know something," he said, looking nervously over his shoulder. "I saw Karen spray painting the curb in front of your driveway last night. She was marking it as has sown only. I didn't want to get involved, but this is getting out of hand." I thanked him for the tip and immediately ordered my own security camera. I installed it that evening, positioning it to capture my driveway and the curb area. I didn't have to wait long for results. At 6:30 the next morning, the camera caught Karen creeping onto my property, a can of spray paint in hand. She defaced my curb with large blue letters spelling "No Parking HOA Enforcement." Then looking directly into the camera, she shouted, "It's not yours. This is for the good of the community." I had her now trespassing and vandalism captured in high definition. I downloaded the footage and called the police non-emergency line. They asked me to bring the evidence to the station, which I did immediately. The officer who reviewed the footage shook his head. "This is clearly harassment and property damage," he confirmed. "We'll be paying Mrs. Winters a visit." I wasn't home when they arrived, but my camera caught the whole thing. Karen was in the process of placing her orange cones in my driveway again when 2 police cruisers pulled up. The officers approached her calmly, but she immediately went on the offensive, waving her HOA rulebook in their faces. "I'm enforcing community standards," she shouted as they explained why they were there. "This driveway is neighborhood property. I have every right to protect it from selfish residents." The officer's response was measured but firm. "Ma'am, we have documentation showing this is private property and we have video evidence of you trespassing and vandalizing it. I'm going to have to ask you to come with us." Karen's face went from red to purple. "Do you know who I am? I've been president of this HOA for 9 years. You can't arrest me for doing my job." But they could. And they did. As they escorted her to the police car, handcuffed and still protesting loudly, she looked at the neighbors who had gathered to watch and shrieked, "This whole street will thank me one day. I'm the only one protecting our property values." The charges against Karen were serious. Criminal trespassing, vandalism, filing false police reports for the towing incident, and harassment. The judge set her bail at $5,000 and issued a restraining order preventing her from coming within 100 feet of my property. At the emergency HOA meeting called the following week, the board voted unanimously to remove Karen as president. As the verdict was read, her face contorted in disbelief. "This is a mistake you'll all regret," she hissed, glaring at each board member in turn. "I've given everything to this community." She stormed out of the meeting room, slamming the door with such force that the HOA mission statement fell off the wall and shattered on the floor.